In 1974, a cinematic legend was forged on the set of Blazing Saddles, a film shrouded in secrets and close calls that nearly kept it from seeing the light of day. 4 years later, a disappeared actor's actions would still resonate in Hollywood, and the iconic John Wayne's 3 words after reading the script almost changed everything. The original title, with its bold connection to Malcolm X, was buried by Warner Brothers, and even the governor's name held a hidden message, a nod to a French performer understood only by historians of the bizarre. These aren't just tidbits. They're the buried history of a film that defied all odds to become a comedic masterpiece, a testament to its creator's relentless vision. Blazing Saddles began as Tex X, a provocative title conceived by a young Andrew Bergman who envisioned a black sheriff in a predominantly white western town. This concept alone was revolutionary for the early 1970s, and naming the sheriff after Malcolm X was a deliberate statement, aiming to dismantle the polished myth of Hollywood cowboys. It flipped the western genre on its head, but the radical nature of the script, especially for a major studio, was almost its undoing. While the Tex X title was eventually dropped, the film's audacious spirit remained. Before Mel Brooks entered the picture, the film nearly took a vastly different turn, with Alan Arkin set to direct and James Earl Jones, long before his Darth Vader fame, cast as the sheriff. Jones, known for his power and depth rather than comedy, was a strong choice, but the project faltered due to creative clashes and nervous executives wary of the script's blunt force. It sat on a shelf, deemed too bold and dangerous, until Mel Brooks, in a moment of personal desperation, resurrected it, pushing its boundaries even further. Mel Brooks, facing financial hardship after a string of less than successful projects, including an Oscar win that didn't translate into box office gold and a flopped film, was ready to abandon filmmaking for television when he was offered Tex X. He didn't take the project out of conviction, but out of sheer desperation. Brooks later admitted that Blazing Saddles saved him, allowing him to buy a home, enjoy a decent meal, and finally breathe easy. The script's creation was pure pandemonium, with Brooks bringing in Andrew Bergman, Richard Pryor, Norman Steinberg, and Alan Yuga. The writing room was a chaotic battleground of yelling, arguing, and fierce competition for jokes, fueled by Chinese takeout and adrenaline into the late hours. The initial draft sprawled to an unwieldy 412 pages, nearly 8 hours of film before being trimmed to a still excessive 275 pages, though packed with wild, rule-breaking humor. Pryor, in particular, imbued the script with his sharp edge, especially in shaping the character of Sheriff Bart. The legendary campfire fart scene emerged from this creative anarchy, a testament to a writing process that was more akin to war than collaboration from the outset. Brooks set the tone with a sign in the writing room: "Please do not write a polite script." He encouraged his team to discard all rules and hold nothing back, operating under the assumption that the film would likely never be made anyway. They attacked racism, parodied Hollywood cliches, and dared to joke about topics previously untouched. Pryor penned Jewish jokes, while Jewish writers crafted black jokes, blurring lines and creating a fearless voice that didn't just satirize westerns but tore them apart and rebuilt something entirely new. Richard Pryor was Brooks's initial choice for Sheriff Bart, but Warner Brothers refused, citing Pryor's drug issues and recent jail time as insurability concerns. Brooks was furious and considered walking away, but Pryor, with surprising calm, encouraged him to persevere. Though Pryor didn't take the lead role, he remained a crucial part of the writing team, significantly shaping the film's tone from behind the scenes. Clavin Little ultimately secured the role, a stroke of luck according to Brooks, though one can only imagine what Pryor's portrayal, especially alongside Gene Wilder, might have looked like, given their legendary comedic partnership. That blossomed just 2 years later. Then came the casting for the Waco Kid, a role that almost went to John Wayne himself. Brooks, audacious as ever, sent the script to Wayne, still one of the biggest stars in the world. Wayne reportedly laughed his ass off overnight, but declined, stating the film was too dirty for his image, though he promised to be first in line to see it. The thought of the quintessential straight-laced cowboy playing a drunken wreck in a genre-mocking film is a tantalizing what-if. After Wayne's refusal, Brooks became fixated on Dan Dailey, a musical theater veteran who was an exceptional horseman. Brooks tracked Dailey down in Hawaii, but Dailey, despite loving the script, declined due to failing eyesight, making it unsafe for him to ride. Brooks was crushed, his search for the perfect actor continuing. The worst casting disaster, however, came with Gig Young, an Oscar winner with the world-weary look Brooks desired. Young had a severe alcohol problem. On the first day of filming, during a jail cell scene, Young began shaking violently. Brooks initially thought it was brilliant acting until Young began spewing green bile. He was rushed to the hospital, never to return, and later sued Warner Brothers. The film had lost its Waco Kid again. It was then that Gene Wilder, whom Brooks had initially deemed too young and fresh for the role, stepped in. Brooks, desperate, called Wilder, who had just finished working with him, on the producers. Wilder immediately flew to Los Angeles, and when he tried on the costume, it fit perfectly. By Monday, he was on set, his quiet charm and unique timing, transforming the Waco Kid into an unforgettable character. His chemistry with Clavin Little became the soul of the film, and this last-minute casting save proved to be a stroke of genius. When Mel Brooks first screened Blazing Saddles for Warner Brothers top brass, it was a disaster. The room was silent. Not a single executive cracked a smile. The film, packed with fart jokes, a horse-punching scene, an unhesitant use of the N-word, elicited discomfort and outrage rather than laughter. Leo Greenfield, the studio's head of domestic distribution, flatly suggested burying the film and taking the financial hit. Others agreed, presenting Brooks with a lengthy list of cuts: the campfire scene, the violence, the slurs. Brooks listened politely, took the list, and crumpled it up the moment he left the room. He wasn't changing a thing. Knowing he had one last shot, Brooks quickly arranged a second screening, not for the executives, but for the studio's workers, secretaries, janitors, mailroom staff. This time, the room erupted from the very first joke. People laughed uncontrollably, gasping for air, some even falling out of their chairs. It was pure, joyous chaos. Co-writer Norman Steinberg vividly recalled the moment, noting that people were literally rolling on the floor. Brooks, witnessing the scene unfold, finally said what he truly felt: "This is our film." That night, the executives saw something they couldn't ignore. Real audiences loved it. And that's what saved the movie from being buried. Despite the overwhelmingly positive audience response, the studio remained nervous, unwilling to risk a nationwide release. They opted for a cautious approach, opening Blazing Saddles in just 3 cities: New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago. There was no advertising, no critic previews, no initial buzz, just a cold release to gauge its reception. These cities were chosen for their likelihood of appreciating the humor, particularly Brooks's signature Jewish Catskills-style comedy. The studio hoped for modest numbers, just enough to save face. What they got instead were packed theaters, uproarious laughter, and word of mouth that spread like wildfire. The gamble paid off, and the film's momentum was unstoppable. Critics were divided, some loving it, others calling it vulgar and offensive, but it didn't matter. Audiences flocked to see it. By the spring of 1974, Blazing Saddles was playing. In cities and small towns alike, with suburban theaters where the studio had expected silence, suddenly selling out. People didn't just watch the film. They quoted it, debated it, and argued over it. Lines wrapped around blocks as families and friends made it a night out. What started as a niche comedy had become a nationwide sensation. Even the most scathing reviews had to concede the crowd's enthusiastic response. The film had shattered every barrier, achieving success with scenes no one believed would make it past the censors. And then came the money. With a modest budget of just $2.6 million, Blazing Saddles went on to gross a staggering $119.6 million in North America, making it the #1 film of 1974. An estimated 63 million people saw it in theaters, surpassing even the audience numbers for any Lord of the Rings film decades later. Adjusted for inflation, Blazing Saddles made nearly $600 million. It wasn't just a success. It was a cultural phenomenon. Mel Brooks had trusted his instincts, defied the executives, and made precisely the movie he wanted to make, and it worked. The film not only survived, but redefined the boundaries of cinematic comedy. Even the smallest details in Blazing Saddles were layered with meaning. Take the governor's name, William J. Lepetamine. It sounds like gibberish, but it's a direct reference to a real French performer named Joseph Pujol. Born in 1857, Pujol was a global star known as Lepetamine, meaning the fart maniac. This wasn't just a stage name, it was his act. He could inhale air or even water into his rectum and release it at will, in tune, on cue, and in rhythm. He played songs, blew out candles, and did impressions. He could even smoke a cigarette using only his backside. Pujol was so popular that nurses were stationed at his shows to assist people who fainted from laughing too hard. Legend has it that one person even died laughing at his performance, and he earned more than the most famous actress in France. When Brooks named the governor after him, it wasn't just for laughs. It was a tribute to a legend of bodily comedy who had once reigned supreme at the Moulin Rouge. Brooks's role as the governor was not his only contribution. He also played a Native American chief who spoke fluent Yiddish in one of the film's most outrageous scenes. The chief allows a wagon of black settlers to pass unharmed, then delivers a joke in Yiddish that completely appends Hollywood Western cliches, saying, "Don't be crazy, let him go as long as you're healthy." He then adds, "They darker than us." It was absurd, it was offensive, and it was deliberate. In the old days, Native American roles were often played by Jewish actors, and Brooks flipped that script, creating a joke so layered that only those familiar with both Jewish culture and Hollywood casting history would truly grasp it. Brooks didn't just act in the film. His voice permeated scenes you'd never guess. He was the uncredited singer backing up Lily Von Stupp and the random heckler. During the final fight, he filled the soundtrack with tiny, hidden versions of himself, crafting comedy through saturation, every frame packed with jokes, every sound tailored for maximum absurdity. If something broke the rules of storytelling, he leaned into it, even Harder, a principle vividly illustrated by the film's deliberate use of anachronisms. It's set in the Old West, yet suddenly the Count Basie Orchestra appears, playing April in Paris, a song from the 1930s. A cowboy casually mentions a TV sports show that didn't exist yet, and the final brawl spectacularly shatters the fourth wall, crashing into a Hollywood soundstage, then into a musical, and finally into a cafeteria. These weren't mistakes, they were statements. Brooks wanted audiences to understand this wasn't merely a Western. It was a comedy masquerading as one, gleefully defying time, space, genre, and logic. And audiences adored it for that very reason. There's a moment about 20 minutes into the movie that seems utterly impossible. In the middle of a dusty 1874 desert, Count Basie and his full jazz orchestra suddenly appear, impeccably dressed in tuxedos, performing April in Paris as if it were a concert hall, not the Wild West. The strange part. Jazz didn't exist in 1874, not even close. Ragtime, its precursor, wouldn't emerge for another 2 decades. Yet, there they are, performing openly in the desert, as if it's the most normal thing imaginable. The scene is jarring, hilarious, and completely out of place, and that's precisely the point. Director Mel Brooks wasn't striving for historical accuracy, he aimed to shock the audience and shatter conventions. This wasn't just a brief musical gag. It lasted several minutes, interrupting the Western storyline, yet it somehow enhanced the mood rather than ruining it. The moment became one of the film's most iconic scenes, showcasing Brooks's affinity for absurd humor and his penchant for appending cinematic traditions. The song Basie played wasn't just any version, either. It was his legendary 1955 arrangement of April in Paris, characterized by bold brass, smooth swing, and Basie's classic piano rhythm. He first recorded it in 1955, and it became a signature part of his live shows, with one of its most famous performances occurring at the 1956 Newport Jazz Festival, a pivotal moment in jazz history. By using that exact version, Brooks added another layer of meaning. He didn't just want a random jazz tune. He chose something rich in history, a tribute to Basie's legacy, and a way to merge real-life music history with comedy. What made the scene even more surreal was that Basie didn't play a character. He played himself, a genuine jazz legend who simply materialized in the middle of a fictional 19th century Western. This choice heightened the scene's strangeness and brilliance. Basie's calm and cool demeanor contrasted sharply with the wild setting, amplifying the comedy. He didn't appear confused. He looked as if he belonged there, which somehow made it even funnier. It's rare to see a world-famous musician participate in such a scene, especially without attempting to steal the spotlight, but that was its charm. Brooks seamlessly blended fantasy and reality, and Basie embraced it completely. This wasn't mere random madness. It was Brooks systematically dismantling the conventions of Western movies. Classic Westerns, particularly those made before 1974, were characterized by serious men, dusty towns, and dramatic gunfights, rarely venturing into comedic territory. But Brooks disregarded tradition. He aimed to break it, and the jazz scene served as his loudest, clearest declaration of intent. Some scholars even believe that placing a black jazz orchestra in a traditionally white, genre-heavy Western setting was a bold statement, challenging old stereotypes and reminding audiences that culture doesn't adhere to neat timelines. It evolves, overlaps, and sometimes collides in the most hilarious ways. There's another secret hidden in Blazing Saddles that most people miss entirely: Anne Bancroft. the Oscar-winning actress and wife of Mel Brooks, made an uncredited appearance. In the movie, despite being one of only 24 actors to ever achieve the triple crown of acting, winning an Oscar, Emmy, and Tony, she sought no attention, quietly joining a church scene as one of the extras. There was no special close-up, no credit, and no grand reveal. She simply blended in. It wasn't a publicity stunt or an inside joke. It was a simple, subtle nod to the project her husband had poured his heart into. This cameo became a charming little Easter egg, one that even devoted fans rarely catch, and it showcased the playful, deeply loyal bond between Bancroft and Brooks, who were married for 41 years. Yet, despite all the evidence, something strange happened. Major film websites like IMDb refused to list Bancroft's role in the movie. Fans submitted screenshots, historians confirmed it, and even Brooks himself mentioned it, but the databases wouldn't update the record. This small oversight evolved into a mini-mystery among movie buffs. People repeatedly tried to correct it, but nothing changed. Some blamed strict rules regarding uncredited roles. Others thought the cameo was simply too minor. But for many fans, the omission itself became part of the story, demonstrating how even the most famous actors can be erased from the record if they choose to quietly step into the background. Not every behind-the-scenes story from Blazing Saddles is quiet. However, Madeline Kahn's audition for the role of Lily Von Stapp began with complete confusion. When Mel Brooks asked to see her legs, she froze. Assuming it was that kind of an audition, the kind women are taught to walk out of. So it's that kind of an audition, she snapped. Brooks, panicking, quickly explained himself. He needed to know if she could perform. A dramatic chair straddle, like Marlene Dietrich did in Destry Rides Again. That was it, no ulterior motives, just research. Kahn understood instantly. She grabbed a chair, lifted her skirt, nailed the pose, and won the role on the spot. Her charm, guts, and comic timing sealed the deal. That single moment led to an Oscar nomination and made her one of the film's biggest stars. But she didn't stop there. Right after the audition, she looked Brooks dead in the eye, lifted her skirt again, and declared, "No touching." The line wasn't scripted or planned. It just came out and was absolutely perfect. That quick line became legendary on set. It wasn't just funny, it set the tone for the entire character. Kahn wasn't merely playing a parody. She embodied the joke, the boundary, and the punchline all at once. Brooks later stated that this single moment convinced him that no one else could play Lily. She possessed the confidence and timing the role demanded, and that fearless spirit ultimately shaped one of the most iconic characters in comedy history. When Mel Brooks began working on Blazing Saddles, even he wasn't sure how far he could push the boundaries. That's where Richard Pryor came in. Pryor wasn't just in the writing room. He was the very soul of the film's courage. Mel Brooks initially hesitated to include the N-word so frequently, nervous that audiences would walk out or studios would shut down the production. Pryor didn't flinch. He told Brooks that if they were truly going to mock racism, they had to depict it as it truly was, unsoftened, uncleaned. They had to use the real language of hate so the audience could genuinely feel its sting. Pryor stated, flat out, "We are writing a story of racial prejudice." That was the word, the only word, and that sealed it. When Pryor couldn't star in the film due to insurability issues, he didn't storm off. Instead, he helped choose his replacement, picking Clavin Little. Pryor reportedly said Little was coal-black and would scare the shit out of that town. That was the central point. The town was supposed to be terrified of a black sheriff, and that fear was what made the satire sting. Clavin Little's smooth, confident performance made the entire setup even more ridiculous, which is precisely why it worked. Without Pryor's persistent push, Little might never have landed the role, and Blazing Saddles wouldn't be the same film. But Pryor wasn't the only source of drama behind the scenes. The original actor cast as the Waco Kid was Gig Young, an Oscar winner. On the very first day of filming, he was supposed to hang upside down in a jail cell for a scene. Instead, he began vomiting uncontrollably. Years of alcoholism had caught up to him, and withdrawal symptoms hit hard. Production halted immediately. Brooks had to act fast. He fired Young and brought in Gene Wilder, who flew across the country to take the role. Young didn't go quietly. He sued Warner Brothers for $10 million for breach of contract, claiming the firing was unfair. The case added legal chaos to an already wild production. But the darkest twist came later. In 1978, Gig Young tragically killed his wife and then himself. His brief, disastrous moment on Blazing Saddles became a disturbing footnote in Hollywood history. And then there was the lawsuit nobody saw coming from Hedy Lamarr. The film's villain, played by Harvey Korman, was named Hedley Lamarr, obvious play on the actress's name. She was far from flattered. Lamarr sued Brooks and Warner Brothers for $10 million, claiming they used her name without permission. The film even joked about the potential lawsuit with a line, "This is 1874. You'll be able to sue her." But Lamarr wasn't laughing. She considered it unauthorized and offensive. Brooks, who admired her, didn't want a drawn-out legal battle. He instructed his lawyers to give her whatever she needed, though the exact amount was never made public. The case became just another example of how Blazing Saddles managed to offend people on every conceivable front, even retired movie legends. Still, none of it stopped the film from making history. In 2000, the American Film Institute released its 100 years, 100 laughs list, and Blazing Saddles came in at number 6, surpassing Airplane, MASH, and dozens of other classics. Only 5 films ranked higher, including Duck Soup and Annie Hall. Then, in 2006, the Library of Congress selected it for the National Film Registry, where culturally and historically important films are preserved forever. It joined icons like Rocky and Fargo, proving it wasn't just outrageous, it mattered. The film mocked racism, lampooned the Western genre, and dared to say things no one else would, and it continues to resonate today. In fact, in 2024, the film sparked a new firestorm when HBO Max added a 3-minute trigger warning before the movie. Viewers had to sit through a message from film scholar Jacqueline Stewart explaining the use of racist slurs and stereotypes, stating that the film used them to mock racism, not to support it. Still, the move stirred backlash, with some saying they didn't need to be lectured, while others argued it helped younger audiences understand what they were watching. Only 2 films on the platform received this treatment: Blazing Saddles and Gone with the Wind. That says everything about how much heat the film still carries. Mel Brooks saw this coming. In a 2017 interview, he famously stated, "Political correctness is the death of comedy." He knew Blazing Saddles couldn't be made today. Studios wouldn't touch it, and audiences would likely explode. He wasn't advocating for hurtful comedy, but he believed that real comedy had to take risks. It had to speak the unspeakable. His warning wasn't just about censorship. It was about art. He crafted a film that went all in on discomfort because he believed that laughter could disarm hate more effectively than anything else.